If you've been around here the last 3 or 4 weeks, the preacher basically has used the word dicey. And it has been a little dicey, hasn't it? But honestly, that's what it is when you've got a pastor like Pastor Josh that just preaches it gun barrel straight. And I appreciate that. And honestly, he has done better than anybody else I have addressing those chapters. We have a gift from God in Pastor Josh. He has really done an amazing job on all his messages, but especially some of these more difficult passages that he's ventured into in the last. And by the way, he asked me because I think there's one more in this series. Okay, and is that right? One more in this series, I think. And honestly, he asked me if I wanted to just pick up where he left off. He's preaching up in about an hour from here. And he asked me if I wanted to pick up where he left off. And I thought the spiritual thing to do is to say, well, I'll pray about it. But in my head, I was like, heavens no. But man, what a fantastic job he's done, and he truly is just filled with the Spirit, and we so appreciate everything he's done, especially in the last few dicey sermons. And but honestly, that's what we need, right? I'd rather someone tell me the truth than sugarcoat it, and so I really do appreciate his series that he's in the way he's handled it. Tells the truth, but with grace and love, and he just cares about all of you. So anyway, I'm going to attempt to kind of segue off of his sermon, because he's been talking about problems in the church and everything from sexual immorality to a guy who had his stepmom basically, and what that has done is it is kind of because as you sit here, there are times when you felt awkward. And another word for awkward could be uncomfortable. But you just felt awkward. And I am the king of awkward, by the way. I don't know if I embarrass easily or what, but I just, I get embarrassed, kind of easily, and I feel awkward. And so I'm sure some of you out there, as he hits on your sin, and I'm sure everybody in here has felt a little uncomfortable, a little awkward while we've been going through these last few chapters in 1 Corinthians. But I was thinking of one of my most awkward moments that I've ever experienced. And it had to be, in fact, in my old church, the Cross Baptist Church, where I pastored for almost 30 years, okay, but I never got past feeling awkward. I hated dead airspace. When you get up in front of people and the mics don't work, or the music, something went wrong, and that dead airspace just makes me feel so awkward, and so I just kind of leaned into it. And we had an unofficial slogan, the Church of Awkward Moments. And it kind of helped, break up the awkwardness a little bit. And so every time something went wrong, I just say, well, it's the Church of Awkward Moments. We got to have one every once in a while, But probably one of my most awkward moments was at a wedding. And at the wedding, they had special songs and all this. In fact, the brother had wrote a song and performed a song, and so it was really important to use the song. And so, everything's all set up for the wedding, and the groom comes down, and he stands next to me, and I'm standing there, and we're getting ready for the bride to come out, and there's some commotion in the back, and they're waving like, 1 minute, that kind of thing. And so I'm standing there, and it was awkward. I mean, the church was full, and it was awkward, And so I'm starting to, kind of sweat, and I look over at, we'll call him John. I look over at John, and he ain't starting to sweat. He's in full-blown, panic mode. And so anyway, I looked at John, and I said, "This is a little awkward, isn't it?" And he says, "Yeah, it is. What's going on?" And so we didn't know what was going on, so we stand there, and a minute goes by, standing in front of a couple hundred people, nothing to say, nothing to do, no one's got any music going, and we're just, it was awkward. And 2 minutes go by, and 3 minutes go by, and I looked at John and I said, "Roll with me on this one." He said, "All right." I said, "Hey, John." He said, "Yeah, Pastor." I said, "Have you ever thought of the similarities between a funeral and a wedding?" And he said, "Well, no, Pastor, I haven't." I said, "Well, think about it. At a funeral, there's lots of flowers. At a wedding, there's lots of flowers." And he said, "Well, I guess that's true. At a funeral, people cry. And at a wedding, people cry." And he said, "Well, that's true." And I said, "Both are held in churches." And he said, "That's true." And I said, "And life as you know it is over." And the whole place broke up. And it broke the awkwardness. And finally, they got the music straight, and things began to roll. But I think what I want to do today, because of the awkwardness that kind of has come across the congregation here of late, and is that we need to learn to kind of lean into it, because the honest truth is that awkwardness is God trying to get a hold of you. And now you can be awkward or uncomfortable, right? Because of, odd situations, or you can be uncomfortable, feel awkward because of your sin. But know this, is God is more interested in your spiritual growth than he is your comfort. And so he will, at times, put us in awkward positions. So, let me give you the backdrop here as we go to John chapter number 4. John chapter number 4, verse number 1. Do we have that? There we go. John chapter number 4, verse number 1. And basically we have Jesus and his disciples. And when therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized disciples, then John, that would be John the Baptist, all right, that's where he's at. And in the backdrop on this, basically the disciples and Jesus have become more popular than ever before. They are getting more followers than, and honestly, kind of the way that thing worked back then is, a rabbi would get a following, and if you, the bigger your following, the more popular you were. And of course, Jesus had the 12, and then others were starting to get baptized and starting to follow him. So he's getting very, very popular, and he's popular for several reasons. Some of them are just intrigued by Jesus' teaching because he taught like nobody ever taught before. He taught with authority, and so They're intrigued by him. Others believe that in hopes that this is the Messiah. He's going to be, he's going to come in, he's going to clean house, he's going to straighten out, because they knew the politics was crooked. They knew that the religious system was crooked. The Pharisees were crooked. They used their position for power and wealth, and he's going to change things. So they're excited about that. And then all of a sudden, Jesus does something that no other rabbi did. All right, because rabbis basically tried to get followings. That was their whole purpose in life. Get a following, get more people, to follow me, and then I'll become more famous, or I'll become a big rabbi. It was very, very unusual to do what he did. And what he did was he turned around and delegated authority to the disciples, and the disciples now could baptize. Though Jesus himself baptized not, but his disciples. He gave them an active ministry. So they're no longer just sitting at the feet of Jesus, at the feet of the famous rabbi. They are actively involved in a ministry, and they are excited. They feel a sense of importance. We've never done it this way. Baptizing, that was a relatively new thing that John the Baptist had come up with. And so Jesus is now saying, you know what? You guys baptize. And so now they're feeling pretty good about themselves. And they're thinking, yep, we're Jesus's entourage. We're his main guys. Now we are actually doing ministry. We're not just sitting and listening. So Jesus basically has become very popular. The 12 are very popular, and so they have this sense of importance. And then it says that they're going to head out to Galilee. Now, it says, and he left Judea and departed unto Galilee. Next screen. And it says, and he must needs go through Samaria. Now, think about this. They are feeling, on top of the world. They are on a mountaintop experience. They are Jesus' main people. They are now actively involved. They're not just listening, but they're actively involved in the ministry. And they're down in Judea, and things probably often, as they often did, Jesus would go into Judea. That's the Jerusalem area, and he would stir the pot. And then when things got a little heated, he would go, if you will, back home. Galilee was kind of his adopted hometown, and he would go back home and let things cool down. Then he'd go back to Jerusalem, and then he would travel back. So they went back and forth between Judea and Jerusalem, and that's a couple days journey. And so this is a well-known path. This is a road that they knew well. It is that path from Judea up to Galilee, and here's the thing: there was such a cultural divide between Jews and Samaritans. The prejudice was deep. It was generational. It just the Samaritans were they were forgive the language, but they were half-breeds. During the captivity, when the Jews were carried off into Babylon, they were left, some of them behind. Usually the elderly, the poor, the sick, that kind of thing, were left behind kind of to manage, fields and crops and herds and all that. And they intermarried with Gentiles. Now, for a Jewish person to intermarry with a Gentile, this was unheard of. You just didn't do that. So these Samaritans were the most despised people by the Jewish people. So you see that cultural prejudice there. They wanted nothing to do with them. So much so that, by the way, here's Judea and here's Galilee, and right in the middle is Samaria. So before they would, when they would travel from an approved area, Judea, to an approved area, Galilee, they would actually cross over the Jordan River, travel up the east side, so they didn't have to go through Samaria. They avoided Samaria at all costs. And they would then cross back over Jordan into Galilee. They would not go through Samaria. So here we are, we're on the top of the mountain, we're Jesus' 12 main guys, and we're important, we're useful, we're doing ministry, and all of a sudden, Jesus says, I got to go through Samaria. You talk about an awkward moment. This goes against everything that they believed. We just don't do this. We've never gone through Samaria. We don't have any contact with Samaritans. In fact, if the Jewish person, and this is not written law, this is oral law, or at least rabbinical tradition, if you had contact with a Samaritan, you had to be ceremonially cleansed, go through that process before you could go into the temple to worship. That's how extreme this was. And Jesus says, I got to go through Samaria. They cannot imagine a reason on this earth that they would have to go through Samaria. It had to be awkward. It had to be a moment that, should we say something to him? I mean, certainly he knows about, our laws and our beliefs and so they went from this high mountaintop experience to, wait a minute, I don't agree. And that's the thing. It's pretty easy to be comfortable in your religion until it bumps up against, one of your personal preferences. Then all of a sudden it gets awkward. And so Jesus, thinking outside of the box, they loved it. They loved it. How he confronted Pharisees and Sadducees, and how he he thought outside of the box. He taught different. He spoke different. He just was, he basically hung out with sinners. He would hung out with tax collectors, and they loved it when he thought outside of the box until it made them uncomfortable, awkward. And the awkwardness basically is a moment when you need and you feel uncomfortable about something, and not something because it's an odd situation, but God's made you feel uncomfortable about a sin in your life. You need to pay attention to that. I truly believe Jesus was trying to get the disciples to see that, wait a minute, this prejudice is not godly. It's not good. They are people. They're people that God loves. So he was more interested in their growth than their comfort. So he said, he must needs go through Samaria. And for the life of them, they could not figure out why, but they went. Awkward moment number 2. And that is John 4, 6? John 4, 6. Now, Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, see how awkward this is? I passed up 5. Did you notice that? All right. Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. Now, the 6th hour will be important here in a minute, but their time frame, the way they kept time, basically it was at sunup, so we can assume that With the 6th hour, they started in the previous evening, but when they talked about a day, basically sunup was hour number 1 and then on. So the 6th hour is approximately noon. All right? All right, so about the 6th hour. Next screen. And it says, "And there cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus said unto her, Give me to drink." All right, verse number 8. "And for his disciples were gone away into the city to buy meat." That would have been a stretch for them to go into a Samaritan village and buy meat. Next verse, and it says, "And then saith the woman of the Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which is the woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans." So the Samaritans didn't like the Jews any more than the Jews liked the Samaritans. So here's the thing. We find in awkward moment number 2 here, there's basically a cultural bias. There's a bias between men and women. And then the time's kind of an issue too, the whole thing at noon. And Jesus has fostered this. He's made this happen, and it's extremely uncomfortable. First off, in that culture, men and women had no contact. In fact, most women could not go out into public unless they had their father or their brother as a chaperone. And so she's out there by herself, no father, no brother. And if men and women were in the same proximity, they weren't even to look at each other. That's just the culture. It's the way it was. You might, you see somebody here out in the parking lot, and you might turn and smile at them, but there they wouldn't even look at each other. All right? It wasn't allowed. It wasn't proper. All right, so basically she's alone, and so there's this contact between a man and a woman, and Jesus spoke to her to kind of break the ice, and it's just, and now the issue too is between Jews and Samaritans. That's a cultural no-no. They don't deal with each other normally in any way, shape, or form, but Jesus now strikes up a conversation about water. And the other issue is she's gone there at noon. Now, many of you know the story of the woman at the well, and that if she's out at noon and she's not collecting water with the rest of the women who do it somewhere around 6 a.m., 7 a.m., she's an outcast. No one wants to be around her. Something's wrong here, and yet Jesus is willing to make her uncomfortable, to put her in those awkward moments, because he left a revival of sorts, right? I mean, they're baptizing people, he's teaching and preaching, and people are beginning to follow him, and he left in this great revival of people in Judea, and goes to one single person that he had, in others' point of view, no business having contact with. And he went there to reach her. And he did it by making her uncomfortable. Men and women don't talk to each other in public outside of chaperones. Jews and Samaritans don't talk to each other. And the fact is that she's some sort of outcast. Doesn't talk, makes you question why she's out there at noon. And so basically, he confronts her. Look at verse 10. And it says this, "And Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldst asked of him, and he would have given thee living water." So he's saying, there's something better out here. You're going for water. Let me tell you about living water. Verse 11. "And the woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and this well's deep, and whence hast thou that living water?" verse 12. And he says, and art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave rank thereof himself and his children and his cattle. And verse 13, and Jesus answered and said unto her, whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But there's something better. 14, but whosoever drinketh the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up unto everlasting life. He's talking about the Holy Spirit. Verse 15. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. Quite the conversation. From an awkward moment to just being realized, okay, as the woman of the well, she's feeling, I'm really feeling uncomfortable here, talking to a guy, and I'm out here at noon, so that he knows there's probably something, I'm an outcast of some sort, and he's a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan, and so anyway, and yet he's saying there's something better. Now, here's awkward moment number 3. Jesus saith unto her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither. Awkward. Her life has basically been a train wreck. I don't know if she's just naive, or she is lousy at choosing men. Maybe she's just plain dumb. I don't know what, but her life has been a train wreck. And Jesus totally ignores the water conversation and basically says, go call your husband. Totally changes the subject, and it's the most awkward, most vulnerable subject of her life. And maybe you've been there. Maybe all of a sudden somebody, like a preacher, stood up here in the last few dicey sermons and said, this is a problem. Whether it's a sexual problem or some sort of moral issue, some sort of discipline issue, we've got some problems and we need to confront them. So, go call your husband and come hither. Verse 17. And the woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. Because, verse 18, for thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. He's saying, yes, I know, your life's a train wreck. You've got a problem. You've got a sin issue. You've got to address this thing. Yes, I put you in an uncomfortable situation. It was very awkward. But the fact is, there's something better out there. And, 5 husbands, and you're not even bothered to marry the guy you're with now? So, verse 19. The woman saith unto her, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. She quickly wants to change the subject. And she goes to about where to worship. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain. Ye say that Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Verse 21, and it says, Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. In verse 22, ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Verse 23, and it says, But the hour cometh, and now is. Doesn't matter where you worship. Doesn't matter the mountain you worship on. Doesn't matter the city you worship on. But when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Not about men and women. It's not about Samaritans and Jews. It's about people who will walk in the Spirit and be honest with God and honest with themselves. And it took a very uncomfortable moment to bring her to this point, because now the model of worship is different. You don't have to go to a temple. You don't have to go to a mountaintop. You have to go to honesty and worship God in honesty. So whatever that awkward moment you had in the last few weeks was, just get honest with God. Just get honest with yourself and address it. Her life had been a train wreck, but she leans into the awkwardness, leans into that uncomfortable place that she's been put, and she just gets honest. Honest with herself and honest with God. Verse 24 says, "But God is a spirit. They that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth." You can keep pretending like nothing's wrong, no problem. In fact, I'll give up some spirituality for comfort, and I'll ignore that uncomfortable. That's the Holy Spirit's conviction that makes you feel awkward at times. You need to pay attention to the awkwardness. And I'm not talking about awkwardness that comes from just embarrassing situations. I'm talking about awkwardness that comes from knowing you've got an issue, a problem. Knowing there's a problem between you and a family member. Knowing there's a problem between you and a wife. Knowing there's a problem between you and your kids. And maybe you need to confront somebody about your problem or their problem. And you just say, it's just so awkward. I don't want to talk to them about it. I don't want to go to my kids and say, what are you looking at on your screen time? I don't want to go to my spouse and say, what are you looking at on your screen time? It's just so awkward. It's just, I just don't, I'd rather be comfortable than feel uncomfortable, than experience the awkwardness. But God is more concerned about your spiritual health than he is your comfort. So, here's your takeaway, because you got to have a takeaway. Jesus is not concerned about awkwardness. He's trying to grow you. And he'll meet you right where you're at. And if you will lean into it. And how do you do that? You see awkwardness as an opportunity. I'm in church and I feel kind of awkward. I feel uncomfortable because, maybe I'm doing something that the preacher hit on, Be honest with yourself and God about your sin. Opportunity 1, be honest with yourself and God. Opportunity number 2, take the opportunity of this awkwardness to address family situations, marriage situations. Maybe it's somebody at work who's being unethical, dishonest. Address it. Your avoidance of what is uncomfortable in your life, it can cost you your calling, what God really has for you to do. So if we prioritize our comfort zone over our growth, we'll end up becoming lukewarm and stagnant as Christians. Now, don't prioritize comfort because it stifles your growth. By the way, if you're here and you've never accepted Christ as your Savior, and they start talking about accepting Jesus, and you start feeling uncomfortable, you feel like they're trying to, they're trying to con me into doing something I don't want to do. Don't, lean into that awkwardness and say, wait a minute, maybe that's something I need to do. Maybe I do need Christ as my Savior. And by the way, if you will lean into it and follow God's prompting, God will bless. You know, the woman at the well, she was the first person that Jesus openly, out loud said, I'm the Messiah. She'll always be known for that. Why? Because she allowed herself to be uncomfortable and leaned into it. And he said, I'm the Messiah. She says, I know the Messiah's coming. And he said, I'm him. And go home and read the rest of the story, because she runs back to the village. And as a result of her testimony, it's like she's the first evangelist. As a result of her testimony, the entire village gets saved. Jesus spends 2 days in that Samaritan village. What can be accomplished when we lean into our awkwardness, that uncomfortableness that God's put in our life to grow us? Let's bow our heads.